Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Three Body Problem Episode 1. It's called Countdown. It's the new show from Netflix which is based on a book, or a book series. I think there's 3 books in total, and I think it's doing that thing where there's maybe a couple of characters that have been pulled from a later book into the early part of the show. The Expanse did that with its adaptation where it would take characters like Avasa Rala who didn't show up until the 2nd or 3rd book and sort of already put her into the first book. I think that's happened here just because I saw some people talking about it. Didn't see any spoilers or anything like that, but just that general kind of idea. So this is one that they've been promising for a while, and they announced it ages ago. It's finally out. I think it was meant to originally come out in January, and it got bumped back by a few months for whatever reason. But it's a science fiction show, which is basically all I knew about it. I knew it was science fiction, right? But I went into this knowing very little. Like, I don't know what the three-body problem is. In terms of, like, what the actual problem is. I don't know. And I don't think it's something that I've missed. I think it's something that we're not supposed to know yet. I suspect that it's maybe something we won't know until the end of the season, potentially. But I knew it was science fiction, but other than that, I think I was expecting, like, 3 dead bodies. Which, at least as of yet, well, technically there's 3 dead bodies, I suppose, but, like, I was expecting, like, 3 crime scenes and, like, we're solving some sort of, like, murder, maybe with time travel or something, and that was just what I assumed on a whim before I watched it, and that's not quite what's going on here exactly. So, I'll get into it. I'll start spoiler-free because it is a new show. I'll give my general feelings, and then we'll get into it. As for what my general feelings are, honestly, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about this as of yet. It's got some interesting ideas. I don't hate the mystery element of, okay, what's actually going on. It sets up a few key things. The main thing being that one of the main characters, Augie, played by Eiza González, she's working in London with other scientists, or she was at least working in London with other scientists, on Hadron Collider type stuff, and seems to have left that to do other things, but she's still friends with all those other scientists who are all kind of a lot of the other main characters. But she starts seeing a countdown, like it's superimposed into her vision, like something's affecting her eyesight, and she sees this countdown, and there's some hints that that's been happening to other people who've eventually had tragic ends, and it kind of sets up, okay, right, what is this? Where's it coming from? What's going on? Given that she's one of the bigger stars, arguably, of the show, I don't expect her to be gone anytime soon, so I expect they're going to take that further. Perhaps more interestingly is that a lot of the story takes place in flashbacks to 1960s China, and that seems to be a big part of the mythology, and that kind of unravels a little bit throughout this first episode as well. It's one of those things where I think some of the broad concepts are intriguing to me. Like, I kind of like the general things that the mystery's prodding at. There's definitely some elements that feel a bit weird. Like, I don't quite understand how that's going to fit in. In particular, at the end of the episode, it's a very BBC thing to do. It does like a this season on Three Body Problem and gives you like a sizzle reel of the rest of the season to sort of whet your appetite for the rest of the show, probably to try and convince people to keep watching. I thought it was very interesting how heavily a lot of that sizzle reel focused on one particular element of this pilot that I thought was the weirdest thing, that I didn't understand how it fit into anything else. I'll just say it's a video game. I'll just call it that. You know, when I get to spoilers, I'll go into a bit more depth, but there's a video game element to this, which felt kind of weird even in this first episode, but to see that that's going to be a major part of the rest of the show threw me for a loop, and I was like, wait, what? Why is that the focus? Surely this other stuff we've been doing should be the focus. So, I don't know. Like, I genuinely am kind of in a weird place with it. What I can speak to is just terms of my experience watching this first episode. Pacing could have been a bit better. I think this definitely suffers from that. We're a prestige TV show, so we're going to be a full 60 minutes, regardless of whether or not we need it or not. And I was definitely getting some of that vibe. This comes from the same duo that adapted Game of Thrones, which I only ever saw a season of because I didn't like Game of Thrones very much, which for a lot of people will probably make you not want to listen to me. But I'm not a fantasy guy. I've never have been. I forced myself through a season of that show because it was the hot thing, and I realized I'm doing this purely because it's supposed to be something I like and not because I actually like it, and just stopped. This obviously is a lot closer to my taste. It's a lot closer to the sort of things that I'm into. I've also heard that the book's considered largely to be very hard to adapt. It's one of those things that a lot of people didn't think they could ever see in TV or a movie. And certainly as a strange premise right now, I think maybe one of the bigger issues the first episode has is that it'll kind of set up a couple of characters, and we'll get a few scenes with them, and it'll feel like they're it's really focusing on these characters as a sort of central pair or trio. But then we'll shift to another character or two, and then we'll sort of be with them for a while. And it actually kind of feels like, by the time it comes back to some of the characters that was introduced early on in the episode, it feels a little bit lopsided. Almost like it should have been maybe going back and forth a little bit more often. A good example of that is the flashback stuff, where the opening episode, the opening scene is a flashback to the 1960s in China. And it makes sense that that's at the start, and it's sort of this tease of like what's really going on, and it sets up a tone for the show that's quite dramatic. And then obviously there's some flashbacks later in the episode, but once that hits, there's a big block of them together in the middle. Like, they're not interspersed throughout. They come in a giant clump in the middle, so by the time we get back to the present day characters, it felt like it had been ages since I'd seen any of them. And this isn't like a huge deal per se, only just to say that I felt the hour. Like, there was moments when as I was watching this where I was feeling the time, right? Amusingly, the whole idea of seeing the countdown, I was feeling the countdown to the end of the episode in a lot of ways. And it's definitely something that I feel with a lot of quote-unquote prestige TV that feels like it has to be this length, that feels like it has to live up to these ideals that other prestige TVs set up. So I'm kind of middling overall, I guess. If I'm really saying all that out loud, it doesn't sound like I'm super positive. I feel like yeah, I'm probably not super positive. Like, it didn't do anything to piss me off. Like, I'll give it that. It didn't really annoy me or anything, and there's definitely some mythology that it sets up by the end that is a little intriguing. But I will say that I wasn't like chomping at the bit to get to the next episode. And honestly, with these binge-style releases, I really, really need to want to watch the rest of them, because they're such a pain to fit into the review schedule, because they're all there, and the longer they sit there, the quicker they're irrelevant, kind of thing. So, anyway, I'll say spoilers for this first episode, so I can get into and just talk about some of the ideas that it presents. There's a lot of things to talk about here, so spoilers for the episode. Just episode 1, I've not seen past that, so I can't spoil anything else. We find out early on in the episode that there's been like a sort of like really severe strain of suicides among scientists. We see BD Wong, who's in the show, go to this crime scene. He's like, he doesn't actually work for any of he's not with the police, he's not with like any of the bodies. He's working sort of privately now for like the last person he can work for, effectively, because he's been fired from all the other places. That's Thomas Wade, played by Liam Cunningham, who I think was in Game of Thrones. I've definitely seen him in other stuff. He's one of those guys that's in a lot of medieval-looking stuff. He's got a face for it. So, but it's very strange. Whoever died is written all these numbers counting down on the wall, so clearly it feels like it links into what's happening to Augie, played by Eiza González, who is one of our main characters who starts to see these numbers in front of her. But there's also another suicide, which doesn't seem as connected, at least to the countdown part of it. I mean, maybe she was seeing the countdown, but nothing about what this other character did felt like it tied into that necessarily. It's basically like one of the main characters, what's his name, Saul, is one of the last people to leave this Hadron Collider experiment. And the person he works with, the boss, she ends up killing herself that night by jumping in this big tank in the middle of the collider. At least I think that's where it is. And a lot of the rest of the episode for him, Augie, Jin, who's another character we're introduced to, and then the two English guys that are part of the group as well. They're at her funeral, they're sort of reminiscing about her. And this is the core group that it feels that we're really getting introduced to. But yeah, so the way this all splits up here is that Augie starts seeing the numbers and gets a mysterious meeting with some character, this woman who shows up randomly and says, something about, hey, like, how long's the countdown been going? And then gives her instructions to look at the sky at midnight the next night, and gives her this like old decoder from like an old cereal box from like the 70s or something like that. That's the thing, like this Augie plot feels like it's the focus of the episode at this point, and then that's basically it. She disappears until the scene where she's with Saul, who she's brought with her to look at the night sky, and that's when the big thing happens at the end. So that was one of the things I was meaning when it felt like it felt like she was the main character in present day, and then it kind of completely shifted to someone else. It felt like a more natural ensemble pacing of like jumping around the characters to make them all feel equal would have probably felt better. Admittedly, now that you're used to like who the main characters are, it's probably easier in follow-up episodes, but it did feel a little bit stilted in this first one. The other thread that sets up stuff is that Jen, the other scientist, she's got like a new boyfriend. One of the English guys was her ex-boyfriend. I don't really have much to say about that. I'm sure there's going to be more stuff to do with that later on. But the big thing is that she goes and spends some time with the dead woman's mother, who actually later turns out to be the woman in the flashbacks. Like, her younger self in the 60s is this woman's mother, which was an interesting reveal when it happened, because right before then in the flashbacks, she'd just been told that because of who she is, because of her scientific beliefs, we'll say, she's never going to be let go of this place she's now working in, because the opening of the episode kind of shows how severe the scientists are being treated for promoting propaganda from the West, because they're bringing in ideas that the Chinese government don't want spread, and it's all very severe, and her father's beaten to death on stage. So that was the whole like, setup. Anyway, like, we find out that this woman is the mother of this suicide scientist earlier in the episode. And where it takes a weird turn is that the mother casually mentions that her daughter was playing this video game a lot, and Jen's like, video game? That doesn't sound like her. And she whips out this like chrome VR headset, which we did see already. We saw it in a crime scene photo. BD Wong was talking about it. It doesn't look like there's any processing power or place or space for there to be processing power. It looks like just like a sort of chrome, like almost like headband sunglasses type thing, but it's like a VR headset. And she takes it with her, and later on puts it on, and sure enough, it does say level 1, and she's in like this fully realized VR world, and she feels like she's really there. And she gets kind of like overstimulated. It starts to feel dangerous. She takes it off. I can't even remember what exactly happened in there. She was in like a desert. There was like a palace, but then there was like a threat. And she takes it off, and she's like, whoa, that's weird. And this was definitely the weirdest thing in the episode to me, because everything else, it felt like it was building up to this idea that, okay, in the 60s, the Chinese government were working with this secret project that involved beaming out signals with this giant satellite, and that's where, you know, the character, the woman, ended up. And she ended up working there because of her scientific expertise. And towards the end of the episode in the flashback, she's realizing that this is not about building a weapon. This is about sending out information. This is about trying to make contact. And seemingly, like, not with any... Like, at first I thought it was about making contact with the future, and I thought there was like a time travel element here. But by the time we got to the end of the episode, I was kind of thinking that it was maybe more that they were just sending out, trying to reach alien life. And at the end of the episode, when the other characters are looking up into the sky, and then everyone starts seeing it, the night sky starts blinking, like it's sending Morse code. The entire, like, of space in the sky starts blinking, which is a very surreal looking visual. So the main plot to me in the episode is all this. It's like trying to make contact with something in space, and seemingly something is making contact back, and that somehow is tying into this countdown stuff that's going on with the scientists who are dropping like flies because they're going mad and killing themselves. That's interesting, right? There's a lot to explain there. There's a lot to unpack and hopefully learn throughout the story, I assume. But that was like the main through line. And it was really surprising to me that this VR headset thing, one, when it showed up and she put it on, and we see this video game. Like, I was expecting her to put it on, and I was expecting her to see something, but I wasn't expecting literally a video game. I thought it was, oh, okay, it's tied to the countdown thing, maybe. maybe it was a way to try and suppress it. Maybe it blocks out certain transmissions or something, or maybe you do see something in there, but it's like therapeutic. I don't know. Like I didn't have like a concrete idea, but I wasn't expecting literally it's a really high-tech video game. That was really surprising to me. And obviously, I'm sure it's a bit deeper than that. There's more to it than it just being a video game, but it very much presents itself as a video game. It says level 1, and then it seems like you have to actually try and win. So I was very surprised in the sizzle reel at the end for the rest of the season that so much of the clips seem to be other characters in the group putting on this headset and trying to do stuff in this VR world. I'm baffled that that's a major component of this, and I don't understand how it connects with it. Now, it might be great. I'm not saying this is a bad idea necessarily, but it felt so separate to everything else that was in this episode, which at least kind of felt like it was, you know, all belonged in the same plot together. Even if I can't connect the countdowns to the space stuff, to the dead scientists, like, I can't connect it all together yet, or who the mysterious woman was who knew what was going on some level. I can't connect it all together, but between like all the stuff that happens in the decades between the 60s stuff and the present day stuff, it all felt like it could be tied together. I could see it, how it all works together, and tonally feels in line. The video game stuff felt like something out of a different thing. It felt like something out of a completely different TV show or movie, where we're doing, you know, cyberpunk stuff. And that was very strange to me. I wasn't sure, like, I genuinely just didn't know how to feel about it. I was like, okay, that's a choice. That's something. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to feel about it. Obviously, the other stuff that was going on in the 60s stuff was that, you know, she was working as like a logger or something like that, and she fell in love with a guy who gave her a book from the West that's in English, but she got caught with the book, which is why she got in trouble. They tried to get her to sort of denounce her father and speak out against him, but she refused. And because of her expertise, instead of going to prison, they sent her to this Red Coast project, which is this big satellite and all the stuff that I kind of was already getting at. So, and that stuff was a bit more interesting, I thought. I will say maybe one of the faults as well right now is that I wouldn't say I'm feeling the characters all that much. I think they're all there to serve the plot, and instead of like having actual like interesting character, I think like the woman from the 60s, and forgive me for not knowing what her name is off the top of my head, but she probably was the one who felt the most developed, because I sort of understood kind of her trauma. I understood her kind of like fight against the system. It was easier to relate to her because of that, because she felt oppressed. All the characters in present day felt kind of just like, I don't know, just felt kind of thin. It felt like BD Wong's kind of a cliche of a detective in a lot of ways. I mean, they're not actually college students, they're all a bit older, they're all like about 30-ish, but like all of those characters were kind of whatever. I mean, John Bradley plays Jack. He's one of the English guys in the group of, at least he was a scientist, now he's selling crisps, I think. He goes on there's a whole scene where he talks about how he's got the third best-selling crisp in the UK after Golden Wonder and Monster Munch, and that was like a really weird scene just to hear him talk about different brands of crisps for 10 seconds. It wasn't a long time by any means, it was just really weirdly specific, but you know, his character's kind of abrasive. He kind of keeps talking about subjects that no one else wants to talk about. He'll start asking if people are having sex with each other. He starts asking this and that. He keeps making the other guy uncomfortable because he keeps bringing up the fact that he broke up with the other woman and probably misses her. I get what they're doing with him. I guess he's just that type of character. I didn't really find it all that endearing though, and it didn't really make me care about the character drama that is there so far with the others. You know, the whole, like, two of them used to be in a couple, but now she's got this new, smarter, like, military-looking boyfriend. You know, I don't really feel much for that as of yet. I think what's weird about it, when I was complaining that we kind of disappear for some of the characters for a long time, because we go to, like, bulk flashback sections, or we switch over to following Jin for several scenes. Like, I get why we're spending time with all these characters, but I think maybe one of the things that I would have liked is that because it felt like Augie was supposed to be the main focal point because she was the one that started seeing the countdowns, that set me up for really getting to know her. And then I felt like the episode didn't give me that. It felt like when we were supposed to start seeing, like, learn who she was and learn what she really cares about, instead we jumped to other characters. So when we got back to the end and she's looking up at the stars with wonder in her eyes because she's seeing this blinking, it didn't feel like I'd learned anything about her. So she felt kind of flat as a character to me. I think that, like I say, the woman from the 60s felt like the one who was the most developed, that I understood who she was, and I was able to care a little bit about what happened. You know, it helped that it started with this tragedy at the start of the episode. So it was easy to empathize with her. Whereas the rest of them, I really feel like they could have done with focusing on just a couple of them and really fleshing them out over the course of the episode. It felt a bit flat by the end to me. So, yeah, I'm kind of middling. It kind of feels like a Netflix show, and I think one of the problems I have with it, or one of the problems I have with committing the time to the rest of it, which would be a pain to do, is that I honestly think it's going to get cancelled. Netflix cancelled just about everything these days, so unless it really pops off and people are watching it en masse and they're really proud of the success, it's probably not going to still be around. And from what I understand, it is a 3-book story, and potentially it would need 2 more seasons to finish its whole thing. So I'm having a real hard time feeling like I want to commit to it, especially when I've still got a couple other new shows that are going on right now. So I don't think I'm going to look at the next episode, or episodes, because they're all out right now. So, you know, apologies if that's disappointing, but I'm just not really feeling the push for it. You know, the motivation is just kind of lacking. So if this was weekly, I might have been like, okay, I'll check out the next one when it hits. But, you know, it's all out right now, and I've got other shows to cover for the next few days, and there's, you know, it'll be days before I can even look at episode 2. So I think we'll just leave it there. I'm not feeling much of a pull to it, sadly. Let me know what you thought of the first episode of 3-Body Problem, and if you have binged the whole show, by all means, say down below what your thoughts were. Try to keep it spoiler-free, not even just for my sake, because I might never even watch the rest of it, but for the other commenters who are just checking out the review for episode 1, you know, be mindful of that. But, you know, say what you think of the season and stuff down below. But, yeah, like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. Helps out a bunch if you do. You can go over to patreon.com and support all the content and help it keep it coming. If I can speak properly, I'm forgetting what words are. You can, of course, check out the other stuff that's getting reviewed right now. I'm reviewing Shogun from FX. That's pretty good. It's about halfway through its season, so you can go check out the reviews for that. I'm almost at the end of Constellation. There's one more episode of that left. So there's a few things going on. Plus there's the classic shows like X-Files and Person of Interest and Twilight Zone, which I'm doing every week. So thank you very much for joining. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?